As a kid, I bet you can remember all the times someone asked you, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Most kids replied with, "Astronaut, doctor, firefighter." But when I was younger, I wanted to be a cartoonist. I wanted to write the funny pages. Every morning, my parents would make breakfast for my brother and me, and I would make sure that I reserved the comics page of the newspaper for myself. My favorite strips were Beetle Bailey, Zits, and Peanuts, but I read them all. I loved their humor, I loved their art, and I loved their stories. Sometime in junior high, I discovered a Calvin and Hobbes book in the entry display at my local Barnes& and Noble. I read that book from cover to cover, and in no time I was hooked. This was one comic I had never seen in my newspaper during breakfast because Calvin and Hobbes was retired in 1995. The cartoon follows two characters. Calvin is a 6-year-old boy with a big personality and a bigger imagination. Hobbes is his stuffed tiger, his conscience, his wild side, and his best friend. Together, the two of them embark on countless adventures, both real and imagined. Creator Bill Watterson did something spectacular with Calvin and Hobbes. By infusing irony and brilliance into the unspoiled innocence of a 6-year-old boy, Watterson was able to make complex lessons of society, relationships, and the human condition seem so simple and captivating. Not only was his writing top-notch, Watterson's artwork was good enough to stand on its own. He was a master of watercolor brushwork, and his ink lines were impeccable. Even so, most art critics view comic strips, even of such high quality, as low art. This is because each day comic art is copied millions of times and distributed around the world. While a Watterson original today may be worth tens of thousands of dollars, 20 years ago the final product was available to anyone at the cost of a newspaper subscription. It is examples like this that make comics so unique. Comics are one of the only art mediums that combine visual and literary elements to portray a message, and because of their wide distribution, the impact of a cartoonist can be global and transcendent. In the words of Watterson, for all their seeming simplicity, the expressive possibilities of comics rival those of any other art form. In the 3,160 Calvin and Hobbes strips published, Bill Watterson was able to create a captivating message that is just as relevant today as it was in the 80s and 90s. Calvin and Hobbes relates to young and old alike, and 20 years down the road, this fact will remain. Because of these elements, the strip quickly became a roaring success after its debut on November 18, 1985. In that first strip, Calvin trapped Hobbes in a homemade tiger trap with the help of a tuna fish sandwich, and from that point on, the rest is history. Just 10 years later, Calvin and Hobbes was in over 2,400 newspapers worldwide, and today there have been 18 book collections published in the U.S., selling 45 million copies. The strip has been translated to more than 24 languages, and Watterson has received many of cartooning's highest awards. The decade-long syndication of Calvin and Hobbes came almost as fast as it went. Since Bill Watterson, no other cartoonist has been able to develop characters, subplots, and layered storylines as quickly and effectively as in Calvin and Hobbes. Similarly, no other cartoonist has so quickly disappeared. At the end of Calvin and Hobbes' syndication in 1995, Bill Watterson promptly removed himself from the spotlight. In the midst of huge merchandising offers and millions of adoring fans, Watterson chose to simply vanish. There are many theories to why he may have disappeared. Perhaps he was tired of the overwhelming attention. Perhaps he wanted the spotlight focused on Calvin instead of the man who created him. What is clear is that Watterson resented the effects of commercialization on the sanctity of cartooning. Battling offers from Steven Spielberg, Walt Disney, and George Lucas, it has been estimated that Calvin and Hobbes could have produced $300 to $400 million. Instead, Watterson chose to focus on the art, maintain control of his work, and bind the splendor of Calvin and Hobbes to the shelves of libraries and newspaper vendors. And it is there, in newspapers and libraries, that people fell in love and continue to fall in love with Calvin and Hobbes. In a 1990 commencement address at Kenyon College, Watterson noted, "Such is American business, where the desire for obscene profits mutes any discussion of conscience." He went on to say that having an enviable career is one thing, and being a happy person is another. That statement defines what Calvin and Hobbes is all about: happiness. It is about imagination and the innocence of childhood, about pursuing truth, purpose, and meaning in this life. As a boy, when I sat down for breakfast every morning, I opened my newspaper to section C and read the funny pages. The comics inspired me to live freely and pursue knowledge. That was the model set by those characters. Even on days where the headlines across the world are bleak, millions of people are still able to find a bit of humor, a bit of encouragement to start their day. In a culture consumed by greed and discontent, that section of newspaper is a rare safe haven. What Calvin and Hobbes showed us is that despite cultural criticism and scrutiny, we all have the opportunity to invent our own life's meaning. We have the freedom to imagine and explore and live. This is the lesson of Calvin and Hobbes, and this is the legacy of Bill Watterson.